Welcome back to the Yin Fang podcast. Today's guest is Dani Pogachefsky, an intuitive guide who helps people uncover and unblock the root causes that hold them back. In this conversation, we explore how childhood conditioning, spiritual alignment, parenting, and emotional resets all intersect on the healing journey. Dani brings raw honesty, powerful insight, and a grounded perspective that reminds us the answers are already within. Let's get into it.
This episode is brought to you by Yin Fang toothpaste. Yin Fang toothpaste is a 4-ingredient toothpaste with coconut oil, baking soda, cacao butter, and nanohydroxyapatite. It's non-toxic. There are no preservatives. It has low abrasivity, which preserves your teeth. It supports your oral and gut microbiome, and it's remineralizing. We ditched the tubes to help the planet, and instead, Yin Fang comes in a sustainable zero-waste packaging and delivery system. Get yours at yinandfang.com.
All right, so excited to be here. We have Dani Pogachefsky with us today. She is an intuitive guide and so much more, I'm sure. We're going to hear all about it. So let's just get started with kind of an intro, like who is Dani and how did you... what was your journey like to get to this path of being a guide?
So my name is Dani Pogachefsky, and at 25 years old, I was living in New York City, and I thought I was really hot. Like, I was living the dream. I was downtown working for an Estee Lauder company called Bobbi Brown Cosmetics in the global marketing department.
Definitely.
I was like under the number 2 woman in the company, and I was getting fast-tracked up the company. And I woke up one day and I was like, I don't like myself. Even though on paper, I had the dream job, I was partying like a rock star, I had great friends, like my life on paper was what a million girls would have killed for. And I was like, I don't like myself. And I was like, if I don't like myself, that means that there are 2 of me. So I wanted to figure out who I am that didn't like this myself, this character that I had become. I had some exposure to spirituality. My mom was a yoga teacher for 20 years at that point. So we had yogis coming in and out of our house. I remember I would be displaced. I would come back from college and there'd be like a yogi in my bed. I'm like, okay. I remember leaving notes on my parents' door. Hey, I'm home. I'm on the couch. and so I had exposure, but it was my mom's thing. It wasn't my thing. But the world wasn't completely foreign to me. But I was this very jaded, materialistic, earthly being character at the time. And when I decided that I wanted to figure out who I am, I now look at it like this higher consciousness, this more aligned version of self, the essence of who I truly am, didn't have that wording at the time. It was just like, I don't like self. Who am I? And I went on a journey. I walked into my boss's office and I was like, I'm going to leave. She was like, okay. It's like, I'm going to go to Nepal. And I'm gonna go to Bali, and I was like, I'm gonna go to Turkey. So I'm gonna trek the Himalayas and work at an orphanage, and I'm gonna do a yoga teacher training. She was like, okay. And I was like, okay. And I walked out of her office, and I was like, what did I just say? I had no idea that Kathmandu was in Nepal. I mean, like, I really didn't know what I was saying. And then one thing led to the next, and everything that I said in that office wound up happening. And I went on this journey of self-discovery, and I called it my happiness project because I wanted to figure out what made me really happy because I realized I wasn't happy. And I got to Turkey and had all of these beautiful synchronicities arise that then brought me to Bali. And in Bali, I did a yoga teacher training, and that was my first exposure to teaching. Now, I, at that point, had an intention to come back to Bobbi Brown. I was going to start a new position in, I don't know, a few months later, 3 months later. And by the time I got to Bali and I started teaching yoga, I knew I wasn't going back to Bobbi, but I did figure I'd go back to New York and do something. And so I remember saying at the teacher training, people were like, oh, you'll be great at teaching. I'm like, oh, I'm not teaching. I'm doing this for me. And that became kind of my mantra everywhere I go. Someone would be like, oh, you should do this. I'm like, oh, no, I'm not doing that. That's just for me. Like, I'm not sharing any of this information. And wouldn't you know, I get back from Asia, and during my time abroad, I had some pretty massive shifts in my consciousness and my awareness of reality. And one thing led to the next, and ever since then I've been teaching and sharing about these kinds of wisdoms. And so in terms of being a spiritual guide, it manifests in a lot of different ways. I work one-on-one with clients to identify patterns and behaviors and what I call the why behind their what. So why are they experiencing what they're experiencing? Why are they thinking what they're thinking? Why are they feeling what they're feeling? The why behind the what. And so we do that. At this point, I've been doing this for 13 years. And it's this fusion, this hybrid, which I can go into the whole process of how I got this hybrid method, but of East meets West, North meets South, you name it. It's an amalgamation of all different wisdom traditions, as well as more scientific methodologies. And in order to figure out, like, holistically, who are we? Why are we here? What are we doing? And what are the barriers between who I am, what I'm aligned with, what I'm really inspired to do versus how I'm showing up, and what's blocking me from being aligned with who I truly am. And so it's kind of like my own personal journey of having all these blocks and these barriers of who I think I should be and showing up as that way that got me into this character that I didn't like anymore. I now help people identify, okay, what if this is character? What if this is essence? How do I get from the character back to my essence? And I do that on a psychic and intuitive level. I do that on a psychological level, an emotional level, a spiritual level, an energetic level. There are a lot of levels to it. But that's kind of the story of how I got to where I am now. And there's a lot that's happened in between that I'm happy to share.
Yeah, sure. Share any or all of it. Is there was there like a moment in this journey, because you start off in yoga, right? And you're not like, I'm gonna be a spiritual guide, right? It's not like I'm a yoga teacher, like I've done that. That's not like, there's not a direct connection there. So was there like a moment? And I know that it's hard to, I struggle with this too, like explaining like what I do, and it can kind of go all over the place, right? Depending on who you're working with or whatever. So was there something that kind of, like a moment that made you realize that is the thing that you were really most connected to, or that was, did you have some sort of vision, or was there some sort of internal spiritual experience, or do you know what I mean?
I do.
Yeah.
I do, and I really, really appreciate that question. The answer is yes and no. Yes, there have been particular moments, and I'm happy to share them with you guys. And I'd say really owning that this is my path and this is my truth took a lot of deconditioning, because I remember I came back and I was pretty clear that this was the trajectory I was going on. And I was met with a lot of resistance. I grew up in a lovely, amazing family, but nice Jewish family from the Northeast. You do particular things. You graduate college, you get a job, you get married, you have kids, right? That was the expected trajectory. And I was on it, and everyone was so proud. And I come back and I have dirt under my nails and I look like a hippie, and I'm practically walking around homeless, right? And so that was not the game plan that my family had in mind for me. And so though there was a recognition and internal knowing that this was my path, I almost instantly was met with, that can't possibly be your path. How are you going to make money? I make more money now doing what I do than I ever made when I was living in New York, right? But I didn't know that that was a possibility. It wasn't something that had been presented as a possibility to me in the past. It was like, well, if you're not working in a corporate job, you're going to be suffering, you're going to struggle. If you're walking around and you're not looking put together, then how could... I just had this memory pop into my head. I remember my dad, and I love my dad so much, but one day I was like, Dad, I think I'm going to dread my hair. And I was pretty convinced I was going to dread my hair. And he goes, I want grandbabies. Do you mind not dreading your hair? Right? It's like the kind of corollary was, if you really take on this hippie persona, if you really dive into this world that you think you want to be a part of, you're not going to get married. You're not going to have kids. You're not going to have success. And so it took a really long time and really it took many years for me to say, oh, that's my conditioning. That's not truth. That's what you expect and that's what you think. And just because it hasn't been done before doesn't mean that I can't do it. And so I got really clear that the spiritual path was my path after a lot of deconditioning. But in terms of when I had a couple of moments where I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that. So I was in Bhutan. So I traveled around Asia, this first journey that I took, and I've been traveling the world ever since, studying with different spiritual guides and masters. I use air quotes, but I really perceive that the people that I've been blessed to work with are masterful at what they do. Excuse me, guys. But when I was in Bhutan, so when I was in Bali, my heart opened. And so I called it my happiness project, right? And so I wanted to have a genuine smile, and I hadn't smiled genuinely probably since I was like 13, right? It was, but like the pains and like, looks good, but like, I'm not really happy, smile. And I remember the day before I left Bali, I ran into a Balinese woman with another Balinese friend of mine, and I see the two of them bickering, and I'm like, what's going on? And she said, she doesn't believe that you're from America. I said, why not? She said that you smile like a Balinese. I was like, all right, I'm good. I can leave now. Yeah. Because I had opened my heart so much that I was able to smile again. Yeah. And then I get to Bhutan, and my crown opened. And so when I say that, I remember I was sitting outside of a monastery, and I closed my eyes. I went to a meditation, and I opened my eyes, and the whole world looked different. And it was the first time I started channeling information. And so my tour guide, who was sitting next to me, was a monk. He had renounced his monk vows, but he had been a monk for most of his life. And he was sitting next to me, and he looked at me, and I don't know, I must have had a look in my eyes. He starts asking me all these questions, and it was things that I had never considered. Why are we here? Why do we die? Where do we go when we die? What happens next? Why do we have connections with other people? And I'm rattling out this information, none of which I had ever contemplated or considered, ever. And in that moment, something had shifted in my consciousness, and I had accessed information that we all have the capacity to access, to be clear. I just had been meditating enough and doing enough pranayama and was in the right place at the right time, and it just, by whatever grace, started accessing information. And in that moment, there was this recognition that life was never going to be the same. It could never be the same. And the minutia that I had gotten caught up in was never going to affect me in the same way that it once had. That the perspectives that I had on reality, where I had so many questions before, all of a sudden, where there once were questions, there was an abundance of answers. Not one answer, but infinite number of answers to the same questions, and I could access any of them depending on what I needed at any given moment. And I would say if there's one moment where I tuned in and I first understood that was my new reality, it was in that moment. It was, to this day, the most profound experience I've ever had. Now, I am a human, and so I've come out of that merged state of being one with everything. But I have moments where I access it again. And I'd say when I'm working with clients, I go back into that expanded space. When I'm really meditating frequently and consistently, if I'm on retreat, I'm right back there. And then I come back and I'm Dani again. And so that was a moment. And then I got back to the US and I'm like expanded. I'm walking around, merged, one with everything. Yeah. I have no sense of boundary whatsoever at all. There's no separation between you and me and anybody. I'm like, we're all one. Yeah. So I'm like, so that means it's okay for me to look at all the information in everybody's fields, right? And that is not okay, turns out. That is wildly invasive. But I didn't realize that at the time, because I'm like, oh, we should all be accessing all this information. We should all be operating like this. So it took reconditioning to come back and be human again. But I remember at the time, there's this one memory that really stands out. I was walking down the street and I saw this man, and I just felt inspired to go put my hand on his heart. I didn't know that I had healing capabilities at this point. We all do, by the way. All of us have the capacity through touch, through love, to heal each other. It's why we are doing this game together, from my humble perspective. And I go up to this guy and I put my hand on his heart and I said, what happened? And he looked at me and he starts crying. I said, what happened to your heart? And he's like, my girlfriend just broke up with me.
Oh.
And I like put my hand on his heart and I looked at him. I said, "You're love. You're going to be just fine." And like I watched the look in his eyes and his whole body shift into, "Oh, I'm love and I'm going to be just fine." From this like, and whereas when I saw him walking down the street, he was like heartbroken, distraught, right? And that moment and a couple of other moments, I was like, why do I know these things about people? Why is all of this coming up? And I'll tell you guys another, this is like one of my favorite stories. But I went on a date because I am human and I date and do all those things. And I went on a date and I'm talking to this guy, and this is still in the beginning when I'm like starting to realize that these gifts are coming online. Mm-hmm. And I look at him and I was like, "Syphilis?" And he goes, "What did you just say?" I was like, "I am so sorry. I don't know why I just said syphilis." He looked at me, he's like, "Okay, well, yes, I just finished a round of antibiotics for syphilis." I was like, "I think you may want to consider going on another round." And he did. He needed to go on another round of antibiotics. Wow. And so
he's like, "Thank you."
He's like, I think he was somewhere between shocked, embarrassed, and just really grateful. Yeah. I think he was like, "I'm not really sure what to do with this." And about 2 years later, I'm on another date and telling the stories, like, so like, what do you do? What does this mean? And I'm like, well, like, I can see things, I can feel things, like, for example, told him that exact story. Moments later, I look at him and I was like, "Do you have herpes?" Not everything is sexually transmitted diseases, by the way, that I'm able to detect. This is just an example. Yeah. But I'm like, "Do you have herpes?" He was like, "No, absolutely not." And I was like, "Okay, sorry, that was so random. Okay, moving on." He leaves, he calls me, he's like, "Dani, I am so sorry. I lied to you. I was just really spooked by everything that you told me in the past, like, 2 hours. Yeah. And he's like, "I do have herpes." He was like, I get outbreaks around my mouth, whatever. And he's like, "I do, but I couldn't tell you that in that moment because I was just really scared about the fact that you were able to detect it." So things like that started happening, and I have a gazillion stories like that. Mm-hmm. And after a while, I just learned I can trust this. And then after a while, I'd studied Vedanta and different philosophies and psychology. And, growing up, I studied comparative religious studies. So I always had an inclination towards, and sociology. So I had an inclination to, like, how do we function as humanity? Mm-hmm. Why do we function the way we do? How do religions, like, where do religions have, like, the same philosophies? Why do they seem to conflict? Is there really a conflict in any of these considerations? Mm-hmm. And so that was back when I was in college and still very jaded and mm-hmm. materialistic. And then I took that and wove it into this next chapter of more like a deeper spiritual connection to all of it. Mm-hmm. And use all of that information to support others. Does that answer the question?
Yeah. Yeah, I have some follow-up stuff. That's a wild story. You kind of mentioned at the beginning of it how when you were in New York, you had the first realization was like you had your own paper life, and then this other kind of persona or like spiritual, mm-hmm. like do those, maybe they're like some separate beings, like do the things merge? Do you always have multiple? Can you have more than two? Like, or like, and now at your current, like where you are now, does that question make sense as far as a...
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's actually a really important question. So
get rid of the old ones, or okay, so all
of the above. Yeah. Well, so here's the thing: we're gonna go down a little bit of an esoteric rabbit hole, if that's okay. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So we all contain multitudes, right? We all are everything. So we have these different identities that we take on in any given moment in response or reaction to the experience that we're having, to the environment, to the need of a moment. So we've taken on identity and we say, I have a need. I will take on this part of my identity. The issue is sometimes those identities get stuck, right? We believe that we need to hold that particular identity and we take it through with all of our needs and every given moment. But normally, ideally, if we're functioning optimally as humans, we are going to take on identities. That's the positive function of the ego, is to try on an identity, use it to meet a need, move on to the next, take it off, put it on, take it off, put it on. Mm-hmm. So we have all of these identities. The issue is when the identity gets stuck and it becomes a character. Does that distinction make sense?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And the other challenge is if we reject any part of our identity. I did that thing once. I got really hurt. I will never do that thing again. I am never going to show up that way ever again because, boy, that broke my heart, and my heart can't be broken, and now I'm vulnerable, and I'm fragile, and I'm a fragile, vulnerable being, and that's my character. I'm fragile, vulnerable, and I'm a hard ass because I don't ever want that to happen again. Okay, boom, personality. Boom, character.
Yeah.
My essence, maybe I'm soft, empathetic, loving, connective. But if I'm taking on this identity of, and this character of, I'm a hard ass baddie who doesn't care and is also really fragile and really vulnerable, and I'm like conflicted and I don't know who I am anymore, that's going to show up. That character is going to show up in the world very differently than my essence would. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
We are all doing this all the time. Every single human that's walking on the planet has taken on identities, has had those identities get stuck, and from that stuck identity has developed a character as a result, right? What I didn't have the language to understand it. I just knew me, character, right? I don't like myself. I, being like the essence who's having the conversation inside of my mind of, why am I happy? Why doesn't this feel right? Like, I'm doing things. I remember, like, I would, I'd go on a date, or I'd say yes to a meeting, or I'd wind up having lunch with somebody, or whatever. I would do things, and I'm like, what am I doing here? Really, like, how did I get here? Well, my character had made those decisions for me, right? My character thought, oh, this person could get me what I want. Oh, that situation is going to give me a free meal. Oh, like whatever it was, right? And so I was manipulating my experience based off of what my character thought I needed in order to survive or thrive. Versus that essence, that essential part of me being inspired to say, do I want to go to that lunch? No, I really don't. Do I need to? Nope, really don't. I'm not going to the lunch, right? Or I want to spend a day in Central Park all day hugging trees. Right? That's something my essence would definitely want to do. Never once did I do anything like that when I lived in New York, right? And so for me at the time, I didn't have a, plethora of words to describe it. I didn't have the lexicon that I do now. I just knew I don't like myself. There's this part, there's me, I, and there's myself, this character that I had become. I don't like this. And if I don't like this, and then that means that I'm split, something's out of alignment, right? I don't know that I would have used the word alignment at the time, but now I understand that that's the case. What I've also come to conclude is that the space between the essence, or like the I, and this character, myself, how divergent they are, that's how much anxiety we're going to have. That's how much depression we're going to experience. That's how disconnected we're going to feel from the decisions that we're making, right? And so does this ever go away, these characters? Probably not. We're human, right? Now I consciously decide which character I'm going to put on, right? So no, we want, from my perspective, I want to have an ego as a human. Believe me, I lived for a little while without any of it, and I was laying in a hammock looking at leaves, like that was it. I was not a particularly functioning human, right? And it was great. It was so good. And I recommend everyone experience it. And like, we're here doing more than just sitting in hammocks looking at leaves, right? We're creating mouth guards that are going to change the way that, football players are able to function, have safety and security because of what you're creating, right? Toothpaste that actually shifts the game. You're supporting your clients. The things that we do are helpful. They're meaningful. They're not just random. But we need characters to come online. We need to take on the identities to meet those needs. Otherwise, I promise you, I can tell you from personal experience, we're sitting in hammocks looking at leaves, pontificating the meaning of life, right? And so I'm not sure if that answers the question, but in terms of like where I am now with it, I've got all of these identities that I can access at any given time. I know who I am essentially. That's not changing.
Are they not as far away from your true essence because you are?
That's a really a point just came to my mind as you named that. Yes, I would say they're aligned. They're in like a resonant frequency with my essence.
Mm-hmm.
I know when they're not, and that can still happen because I am human. We're all human, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Typically, that's happening because I am pulling information from the past into the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
If we talk about unresolved trauma.
Mm-hmm.
I had a client, and I love working with him, and he came because he wanted spiritual guidance. And he's like, I want to access my spirituality. I'm like, great, let's talk about your mom and dad. He was like, what?
Yeah.
He's like, that is not why I'm here. He's like, I want to talk about, like, you know, what's going on in the cosmos. And I was like, totally. We first have to talk about mom and dad, right? Like, let's talk about what's holding you back from, because you're going to access that information, no problem, when we release our attachment to the past. And those, when I was talking about barriers and boundaries that hold us back from being our essence, it's all the gunk that we picked up along the way based off of the experiences we had that we tried to protect ourselves around or from experiencing again.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, who can't relate to that statement?
We all of us, right? Yeah. And so, so we've worked through a lot of his mom and dad stuff. We like get to other material and other layers. And I was like, okay, now we're going to look at this. He's like, what about that? I'm like, trust me, let's look at this. We go through unpacking a couple of other things. He's like, my meditations are crazy. I'm seeing things. I'm like, you have the answers. I don't have to guide you spiritually, right? You are a spiritual being. We are all spiritual beings having human experiences. So when we can unravel the attachment to the human experience and still appreciate the fact that we're humans, that we have the most epic spiritual experiences. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
This is a good segue because I wanted to ask kind of like, and you just, that example is kind of a start of like a real world example of when someone comes to you, what are they typically seeking? Yeah. And then like that's an example of someone kind of looking for something else, which is so common, I think, in all the coaching space, you know?
Yeah.
It's like you come for one thing, we were like, that's not really it, like we're going over here. But so like what are they typically seeking? And then what are some of like examples of like barriers or blocks that you're working to help them release or uncover and like move through?
Okay, so I want to speak to the barrier blocks first and then go into what people are seeking. I'd say at the end of the day, it's worthiness, right? I think at the end of the day, the greatest barrier or block has to do with worthiness, self-worth, and that manifests in so many different ways. But self-love and self-worth ultimately are the barriers and the blocks. Now, the self-worth and self-love could have been compromised because parents wanted you to be a certain way and you needed to be something else. It could be compromised because we felt rejected when we were children. It could be compromised because we thought that we needed to show up. Whatever, it doesn't matter. There are an infinite number. Let me count the ways. It's infinite. How we can learn to devalue, exactly, to devalue ourselves. And how we're conditioned that we're not good enough, right? That belief system of I'm not enough. It could never happen for me. Oh, I see that for that person, but that could never happen for me. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the main barrier or block that I perceive I'm working with, again, I'm like a heat-seeking missile, right? I'm like, what's the block? What's the block?
Yeah.
I would say 9.5 times out of 10, it has to do with worthiness and lovability, right? And all of us are seeking that, to know that we're enough, to know that we're lovable, to know that we're capable and worthy. And then from there, it's about unraveling these identities and the attachments that we have to them and giving ourselves permission to be all of it. People come to me for a number of reasons, but the essence of what I think they're coming for, what I find people are coming for, is they want to know who they are. There's a discomfort that they're experiencing in their reality. And I'm totally cool with discomfort, to be clear. They're like, I'm so uncomfortable. I'm like, great. Why? That's not a problem, right?
Yeah.
That's where the juice is. Now, do we have to live in discomfort? No. But is there beauty in the discomfort? Absolutely. And so it's I'd say I don't know if this is answering that question directly, but one of my, I don't know if it's my superpower or what I think I really offer people ultimately is a non-judgmental, unconditionally loving environment for them to be exactly who they are, so that any guilt, shame, judgment around who they are, what they've experienced gets to dissolve, so that they can be free of that burden and actually know that they are worthy and lovable and can do anything that they want to do, rather than feel trapped by the past defining how they're going to move forward in the future. So people come because they're like, something feels out of alignment, something feels out of whack, right? Like I don't know, I'm depressed, I'm having anxiety, I keep waking up in the middle of the night with a recurring dream. I love dreams. What else? You know, I'm dating the same guy over and over again. I don't like him. I'm like, all right, let's take a look at why, right? Or I'm making this, and oftentimes it's like I'm making the same decisions over and over again, or I'm attracting the same thing over and over again. Why am I doing that? And we're like, okay, great, no problem. There's a reason. We make sense. And this is another point, which I'm getting a little tangential, so I'm not staying exactly on your question.
I love the tangent.
Okay, great. But like, we make sense. We make perfect sense in the context of our experience, always. So if somebody's like, I don't understand why this is happening, like, you can.
Yeah.
If you're honest with yourself, you give yourself permission to accept what has happened, and you also give yourself permission to have a different future. And that's all permission-based, knowing that you're worthy enough. Giving, like what we were speaking to before we even got started, right? Saying, I am worthy and powerful and capable of creating the reality that I want to create. Right? And not just that we want to create, that I'm aligned and inspired to create. I'm going to give myself permission to unravel whatever's holding me back from stepping into and being that full expression of myself. When we do that, it does require being radically honest, unapologetic, and also sometimes apologetic, but without any judgment for what we've experienced in the past, so that we can move forward, so we're not pulling that past with us into the future. We're cutting that tie. That's the attachment that I think is often very toxic. We're cutting that attachment to be able to move forward from a place of alignment versus the baggage from what we've picked up over the course of our lifetime.
Yeah.
So that's what I help people do, I think.
Yeah.
Is it harder, like, you know, listening, thinking of your story and then how you're helping people here in the U.S., like, is the environmental, like, all the stuff that's humming around us, all these things, you know, distractions everywhere and energies or whatnot, is it harder to get to where you want to go, like in the U.S. maybe versus like in other parts of the world, like Nepal or Bali?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and, right? It may be harder, but it's perfect because, yeah, there are a number of ways I could answer that question. So I want to answer it from, yes, it's a different vibrational frequency here than it is. I sat on a mountain in Bhutan, closed my eyes, opened them, and had a transmission. That wasn't just because it wasn't just about me. That was me and my environment. I was blessed to have that experience. I often recommend, I'm like, oh, you want a fast track? Go over there. Do it. But I also want to be clear. I could go and live in a cave and I could be really blissful and peaceful and have all these amazing spiritual experiences and come back and be an asshole. I probably haven't shifted, right? My own inner journey probably hasn't expanded to the point that I have the capacity to expand. It's when we're in these more challenging environments that we're actually given the opportunity to transcend in meaningful ways. So yes, is it easier to go over there and have those experiences? Yeah. Do I recommend people do it for a refresher because this is a bloodbath? For sure. Yeah. Definitely. And it's just like when we were talking about, you know, oh, the space feels really heavy. I can't be here. I have to get my stage. I need this thing in order to be okay. Let me take off my shoes and ground. Like, yeah, take off your shoes, earth, ground, do all of the things. And know that if we were born in this environment, then we were born, it's like a seed of a tree. It has all of the nutrients, all of the material that it needs in order to sprout into the most magnificent, expansive expression of tree. And so we are the same. Like, we were born in an environment, and I don't know, I believe in God, but I call it the universe or energy or this creation, this creator that somehow very intelligently defined and orchestrated this whole experience that we're having. So that intelligence is within us in every given moment. And we were given the absolute perfect amount of it, from my perspective, the absolute perfect amount of intelligence, of resilience, of badassness, of softness, of whatever it is that we need in order to navigate our particular human story. And if that's in the United States, believe you me, you've got enough grit to get through this lifetime. And so if we can like empower ourselves to know, oh, I've got the grit that I need. I've got the spiritual connection that I need. Everything is within me at all times. I do not need a crystal. I do not need a sage. I do not need anything other than what is innately in me. And by the way, it's a really challenging world out there. So go get your crystals and your sages and like all the things to support yourself, whatever it takes. But like knowing that I don't need any of that. And so is it challenging? Yeah. But like the person who's lifting 100 pounds at the gym is probably going to get more muscle mass than the one who's lifting 3 pounds.
Right. We're meant to be challenged. It's easy to be kind and blissful and whatever you want to be on the top of a mountain by yourself, right? I think about like myself before I had kids. I in my mind, I was like, I've overcome, I'm so chill, I like, you know, like I used to be like a really angsty, angry teenager, you know, I was like, I've really evolved, I'm just so gentle and calm, and then by the third kid, I'm like, fuck, where did all of this irritation and anger come from? Like, oh, it's in there, it's just like, you know, but that's like the work is, like, you don't get stronger without the challenge, right? Like exactly what you're saying, you don't lift, you have to lift weights, right, if you want to build muscle. And that's such a good point that, yeah, it's not about freeing yourself from adversity,
right?
You know, it's about gathering the tools to grow while you're in it, you know. So yeah, that's such an interesting thing. And also thinking about like the characters and the you were talking about earlier. I mean, we do this just to put it in perspective of like taking it out of like kind of the esoteric to like, you know, we take on, we're moms and dads, we're bosses, we're entrepreneurs, you know, we're friends, we're aunts, we're uncles, and like I'm a different person in each of those roles.
Exactly.
100%, you know, like I'm different as an aunt than I am as a mom, right?
But like you still want to still be you, like,
right?
Even though, right?
Yes,
yeah.
And you can feel it, right?
Yeah.
And you can feel. It makes total sense. Like you feel unhappy in whatever that box is if you're not being true to the core of who you are. You know, like
100%. And so you're going to show up very different as a wife than you are as a mom.
Wife, I forgot that one.
Right? Right.
The most important one.
Right. But so you're going to show up very differently as a wife than you are as a friend and as a mom. It would be kind of weird if you showed up as a wife to your kids.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? It would be kind of strange if you showed up as a mom to your husband.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And
so
people do that and it doesn't work out.
So many people do that.
Yeah.
And so many people internalize the particular identity.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes their character, and you're like, why are you mothering me right now?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, because my value on this planet is to be a mom.
Yeah.
And it's like, is it in this moment? Is like, right. I just needed a friend. Yeah. I didn't need that. I did not need that.
Yeah, that happened. I mean, I can identify with that.
Right?
That it's hard sometimes. The mother friend is hard sometimes. I think.
Yeah.
Once you have multiple children, it's hard to step out of that role. And I oftentimes walk away from conversation with friends and I'm like, that's not what they needed, you know?
Sure.
Like, that was not the role that they were wanting from me, you know? And I think that just, you know, so then you adjust. Then it's like next time I'm like very conscious of, you know, who I show up as, right?
Yeah.
What character I show up as. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think it's so valuable to be informed by the past, right? Mm-hmm. To say, oop, oh, okay, yeah, I definitely did that thing one time. I'm not going to do that again.
Mm-hmm.
So long as that doesn't define how you show up, because maybe the role that you showed up the last time is exactly what they need the next time.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And then you're like, I'm not going to be that because I was that one time.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah. That's so true.
So the commitment that I like to make is, I love to be intentional with my day, but may I be the instrument, right? Or may I be the vessel of alignment, of attunement that is asked of me in any given moment.
Yeah.
Right? And that may mean putting on identities and showing up in ways that I wasn't necessarily comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
My natural inclination is very soft. Like I'm gushy, mushy, compassionate. I'm like, tell me, ultimate supporter, right? Like, tell me what you need. How can I do that for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I learned that I got to take on more identity of being definitive, decisive, clear, not mincing words, right? Giving reflections that might be hard to swallow. Whereas before I was like, I'm going to hurt their feelings. I can't do that. Some of the most potent, powerful sessions that I've had, interactions that I've had with friends or otherwise, is when I stop mincing words, when I stop trying to be the soft, sweet, compassionate being. And I'm like, yo, someone's got to tell you this because nobody else is, right? And boom, and like we're cutting through. And there are different, in all different mythology, there are different gods, goddesses who represent that archetype of the fierce interrupter, right? And I was like, I will never be that. Like, that is not my personality. And, well, I'll be darned if I tell you, I definitely espouse that at times. I will definitely show up with my Durga or my Kali. These are different Hindu goddesses, right, who I feared. And I was like, nope, I reject that part of me. I will never be that. God, when I try them on, when I wear them, because that's what's needed in a given moment, it's amazing what happens. So I think a big part of what I perceive as real spiritual evolution is being able to accept all of those identities and not staying stuck in one.
Yeah.
And then one of the ways that we get there is when we see I'm stuck in this one because of a belief system I have from the past. We don't get stuck in one because we're in the present moment, I promise. We get stuck because of the impact that something in the past has had on us. So that's why I joke when I'm working with someone, I know you want to talk about spirituality, but we got to talk about mom and dad, or we got to talk about your partner, or we've got to talk about these other things that seem like that's really human mundane. It's like, that is the process. That is the work. And it's because of how what we have internalized, the belief systems that we are holding. And the amazing thing is we can detach from them like that. It's just giving ourselves permission to understand the lesson, like what we're really holding. What is that aspect of ourselves trying to reveal? What is its intention? What is its goal? What is its need? Oh, it's trying to keep us safe. Oh, it's trying to keep us married. Oh, it's trying to keep our kids from getting hurt. Oh, and then I thought that I needed to do that all of the time. And really that's detrimental to my marriage, my kids being safe, my goals being met. Like, oh, isn't that interesting? And then not getting mad at ourselves for not knowing what we didn't know in the past and giving ourselves permission to show up differently moving forward. And I think that's the spiritual journey. Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah. So what kind of a person, that maybe sounds weird, but who is like best suited to like work with you? Like, how do people show up? And I imagine like any type of coaching situation, like some people are ready and some people are not.
Yeah.
So how does that kind of manifest in your world?
Yeah. So that's such a good question for so many reasons. I love that idea of I'm not everyone's cup of tea because I'm champagne, right? Like, like I'm definitely not for everyone.
Sure.
Right? Because I recognize it's not standard, but and it's not an expectation, but what I offer, the opportunity that I offer for people is not a typical, oh, let's just like make you feel really good right now. Which I think a lot of people look for in getting guidance work. They're like, I just want to feel better. By the way, you probably will. You probably will feel better, but that's not my commitment. That's not what I am going for. And so in order to get to that place of relief and to get to that attunement with self, we may be going through some very uncomfortable terrain.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm best suited for people who are okay with going there, who want to, not just okay with it, they want to go there. They're like, bring it on. This sucks. What else? Because they know on the other side, and there's a trust that on the other side of that sticky, uncomfortable environment, that there's a relief that comes on the other end, that there's expansion that comes on the other end, that it's like type 2 fun. You know the difference between type 1 and type 2 fun?
Yeah.
So type 1 fun is like, it's fun in the moment. I love it. Type 2 fun is climbing Mount Everest. It sucks. It's uncomfortable. But then you get to the top of Everest and you're like,
Best thing ever.
Best thing I've ever done. I can't imagine if I hadn't done it.
Yeah.
I don't know from personal experience. I did Annapurna, not Everest. But that's the difference between type 1 and type 2 fun. And so it's like those type 2 fun junkies, we're probably going to do really well together, right? But I'd say it's really for people who are committed to transformation.
Would you say it's like high achievers?
Very much so. I typically am working with very high achievers.
I have a tangent on this. And what's your experience with like ayahuasca and like using like, you know, other substances to help get people there, or like it's just a
Okay, before I answer that, I'm going to start by saying nothing is right for everyone and everything is right for someone. It's an Ayurvedic principle, but not everyone needs ayahuasca or plant medicine. For some people, that is the right approach. It's the right medicine. It's the right tool to get them to where they're going to go. Okay, with that caveat, my perspective is probably a bit of a hot take in the spiritual communities.
Let's hear it.
Yeah.
So I first need to, it's so important to name. I have the utmost reverence for the medicines. Like, my respect for the plants. There are times where I look at what's happening in the world around ayahuasca and San Pedro and these other potent spirits, and it breaks my heart. Like, I have spent much time crying around this particular topic because we've developed, even marijuana, like you name it, there are plants that have spirit, that have the capacity to heal, and they're being abused, taken advantage of. I mean, welcome to the way that our world functions right now, right? How can we extract? How can we monetize? How can we and so personally, I feel tremendous pain around the way that that's unfolding. And it's perfect, and there's medicine in it, and it's all going to reveal itself in its due time, right? Not everyone is meant to sit with ayahuasca. And most people that I see going towards those medicines are going towards them from a place of lack and trying to get something from the medicine. I want insight. I want a spiritual experience. It just feels like the next step on my journey. Okay, great. That may be true. But the plant itself, the spirit of the plant will call you when it's time for you to work with the spirit of the plant. And if that's not the case, you may have a cool experience. You may develop insight, but the integration process is going to be really challenging. And I'm just checking in to see if I want to say what I was going to say. Because not only is the integration, is there a complexity that happens with the integration, which is fine, because we're potent, powerful, remarkable beings. We can heal anything. It's not that serious ultimately. And the level of cleanup that's required after experiencing that level of expansion, if our system isn't ready for it, is like if you plug a blow dryer into a socket that doesn't have the right voltage, right? You might break the thing. Yeah. And not only might you break the thing, like you might be able to go send it in and get it repaired, but it may never function the same. But it will, and it's okay, right? So I want to be mindful, because there's nothing, like, I don't want to scare people around plant medicine, right? It's beautiful. It's incredible when we go in intentionally and we are allies with the plants. They're amazing. Most people aren't ready for plants from my humble perspective. Most people, or they're ready, but they're going in with an extractive perspective. And then it's like, you know, I see people treating ayahuasca like having a glass of wine, right? They're like, oh, and then I went to work the next day. And I'm like, He did what? Did what? And great, okay, maybe that was exactly what you needed, right? I'm not here to yuck people's yum. However, if you're asking me like what my perspective is in terms of do people need that, is that beneficial? The plants are incredible. They have the capacity to expand our consciousness if we are doing our own work. But if we become dependent on those plants to do the work for us that we're not willing to do because we want to grind over here, and so we're not going to do our spiritual work, well, there's going to be a price to pay for that. There is going to be a reckoning around that.
It seems like to me it's really no different. You can name a zillion drugs, and it seems like, I don't want this to sound judgmental because I've never done ayahuasca nor any other drug really, and that's not something that like speaks to me, but it just feels like it's kind of the same reason all the time. It's like people are trying to either like numb out or skip a step. And like they want the results without doing the work. It's really honestly like any medicine, like pharmaceutical all the way to plants, right? It's and yeah, I don't know what the situation would be like where it is necessitated, but it seems like you're gonna have some sort of fallout, like you're talking about, if you do any of those things without being willing to do, like really do work, you know, and then what's the point? Like, why don't you just do the work is kind of in the way I think about it.
Absolutely. And I agree with that completely. What I would add to that is, like, you know, we take supplements and vitamins and minerals because we get depleted, right? And so there are times where, and supplements, the minerals, the vitamins that I need are going to be very different than the ones that you need or anybody else needs, right? Depending on what we've experienced and how we're holding it and how our body's responding. Same thing is true energetically and spiritually. And so I don't perceive ayahuasca as a necessity or any of these medicines as a necessity. Now, I've personally never sat with ayahuasca. I've sat with, oh my God, blanking right now. It'll come to me. I've sat with other medicine before. Peyote. That took me a minute. I've sat with peyote, but I have an interesting story that I can share about my experience sitting with peyote. And I've worked with mushrooms before. We're such cute little buggers. They really are. Yeah. Fun spirits. But there isn't a necessity. There are ways that it can enhance and supplement our lives if it's done in accordance with the spirits of those plants. Most people aren't doing that these days. And most people are half-baked. I would say this was... many people who are serving are authentic, genuine, wonderful, beautiful people. Many of them have no idea what they're doing. Some of them do. Serving the medicine.
Yeah.
Right? Some of them do. Many of them do not. And so then you have these half-baked experiences with half-baked practitioners. This could get me a lot of slack for saying this, but truly, versus like, are you committed to sitting with that plant? Okay, so for me, if I'm going to sit with a plant or a medicine, I'm going to be in its natural habitat. I'm going to go to the place where it's from. I'm going to have reverence for that plant. I'm going to work with the shamans or the medicine people who have been carrying this tradition for lineages, right? And I'm going to work specifically with that. Now, can we all do that? No. Is it important that we all have access to certain things? To a certain extent, yes. So do I see that there's benefit and value to people who aren't of that nature and that caliber bringing the medicine to others? There could be, so long as it's done with integrity of those lineages and those traditions. But I think you can either take the shortcut, but then there is always a price to pay. And sometimes we need a shortcut. I've taken antibiotics before, right? Sure. More than a handful of times in my life. And I attribute me being alive to the fact that I've taken antibiotics before. Thank God for that modern medicine. Now, there were times where I was abusing them. Wouldn't recommend it. messed up my microbiome, right? There were side effects. There were complications. And then I got to rebuild my microbiome as a result. Am I resilient? Yes. Is my microbiome doing great? Fantastic. Right? So again, nothing is irreparable, but we have to recognize, I think it's really important to recognize if we do things, there are ramifications, there are implications. And sometimes, drastic experiences are cause for dramatic interventions.
Sure.
So there may be a time where that is the necessity, right? And you hear of people going and studying or sitting with shamans in the Amazon who give them ayahuasca and they cure stage 4 cancer because they looked at and resolved the trauma, the incident, the input, the emotion, the spiritual energetics that were creating that cancer, right? Which I do believe that every physical ailment, implication, any physical or psychological experience that we're having, there is a root cause that's rooted in spirituality
100%.
and emotional integration of that or lack of integration of that. So yeah, there are ways that it can be really powerful, potent medicine. It can help expand consciousness, right? I know a lot of friends, I've never personally done it, but I know a lot of friends who have sat with, experienced acid, right? And they were like, I've never been the same. I'm like, great.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Now go ground your grounding cord because you're also not on the planet anymore, right? Like, I'm so glad you're out there, but like, let's pull you back down to earth too. So nothing is right for everyone. Everything's right for something, for someone. Nothing is good or bad. Can we be really conscientious and aware of the implications of the choices that we're making? So that we can then, if I have a friend who has HIV and he's an Ayurvedic practitioner. His ability he wanted to cure his HIV just with herbs. He realized that wasn't possible. He really needed the HIV medication, the pharmaceuticals. He started taking the pharmaceuticals and there were a lot of side effects. He was like, I can use my Ayurvedic knowledge to support myself. And now he lives a real, optimal, stable, fabulous life where he doesn't even, if you were to ask him about his HIV, he's like, what? Right? But it's because he found the balance of both. And so how do we, in this world that is taxing on the nervous system, the physical system, all of the things, how do we allow ourselves to be conscientious of that without defaulting to fear? And then in that space, choose the medicines that are actually aligned for creating balance and harmony within our own experience and our environment.
Yeah, there's so many people that have so many positive testimonials of these plant-based medicines. Think of mushrooms and changing and opening up access to different wavelengths that you didn't know you had, maybe whether it be friendships or that you're using these medicines with friends and forever your life has changed because, or these people that are dealing with PTSD, military folks or whatever it is, any type of, they're some of the psychedelics and these medications are really helping with that, right? So
100%.
It's an interesting, it's a cool filter to hear you process it through of just be ready for it. It's not for everyone, but it can help a lot of people.
And it can, and it is a medicine, right? It's a profound medicine. And so if you're going in with a reverence for that medicine, great, do it.
Yeah.
Right? And it's more of these very extractive, the next thing in spirituality. And we're okay. And for people who are having these experiences of opening their consciousness in a new and evolved way, I think it's great. I think it is potent, it is powerful. I have people very close to me who have gone through facilitated experiences that have changed their traumatic wiring. Now, I'm of the ilk that that's not necessarily, that's not the only way, right? Yeah. There are other tools that aren't that intervention that are also highly effective at facilitating healing and rewiring the brain, trauma. The ALA is one of them. One of these experiences, you go in and you're like, what just happened to me? I've sat with shamans, I've done a lot of the work, and I'm like, oh, this is a ceremony, right? ALA is Ascension Leadership Academy, and it's a transformational program here in Austin, right? the work that I do with people. Like, why do I feel high right now? I'm like, you are. It's okay. Let's go. You know, and it's not because.
But it's not because I slipped you some acid in that water.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've done mushrooms. I think that would help you in your life to experience that, but you can get that same improvement maybe not using.
Totally. And I remember. Okay, so here's a fun story for y'all.
Yeah.
So when I first got back from Asia, I wound up living in a psychedelic state for about 7 months. At that point in my life, I had never done a psychedelic before. So I had no idea what was going on. So remember I told you there was a period of time where I was laying in a hammock looking at leaves? Mm-hmm. For about 7 months, that was about what I was doing. Mm-hmm. Right? I was meditating and I was doing some other things as well, but I genuinely lived in a psychedelic state. I just didn't understand that that's what was happening. It's like, why is everything hyper 3D? Why can I feel what you're feeling? Why can I? This is all interesting. Mm-hmm. It wasn't sustainable in my human form. And so I wound up crashing pretty hard afterwards. And it was beautiful. I was like so happy. I had like a grin from ear to ear. And I definitely was the happiest, most joyful I'd ever been to that point. Crashed very hard, had what people often call like the dark night of the soul. And I was with my boyfriend at the time, and he was doing mushrooms, and he's like, I think you should try these. I was like, okay, I'll try them. And I ate them, and I went back to that space that I had been when I was in that expanded space of consciousness, which at the time I didn't realize was psychedelic. I just thought it was expansive, which it is. And when we go into those psychedelic spaces, we are in expanded states of consciousness. I got there through pranayama, through sitting with teachers, through meditation, through a commitment to my practice. I didn't miss a meditation, right? I went to these sacred sites. I drank the sacred waters. I did what I was going on my journey and naturally wound up in that place, right? This was a great shortcut to get there, though.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, feels like home. I get why people do this.
Yeah.
Like, I get it now. Now, I'll go to festivals with friends, and they'll be on all sorts of concoctions of psychedelics and medicines. And, well, I don't even know what they're on. Mm-hmm. And I'll just go, okay, let me tune into that frequency. Boop. And I'll meet them where they are. And I don't need to take the medicine in order to do that. I can just say, oh, what frequency are you guys at right now? Okay, got it. Boom. And I'll meet them right there.
Yeah.
And people will see me, they're like, you're the most high person here. I'm like, I'm sober. Completely. Right?
Amazing.
And which is great.
No,
and I don't have a hangover. And that's the thing. Although if you keep me out late enough, I swear, I'm like, I think I'm hungover off of the water. But that we all have the capacity to access it. It's just giving us the shortcut to get there. Mm-hmm. And so I have a reverence, a respect for the mushrooms. They really helped me to understand what was going on in my consciousness at that time. Mm-hmm. And then now, peyote was a different story. At that point, I knew I wasn't meant to work with medicine. Knew it, like internally had a clarity. It is not my time to be working with medicine. And this happens often, and I was particularly susceptible to it. I met a teacher who was a fabulous teacher, could see everything, and I was like, oh, he must have the answers. He must know. He's like, you have to sit with the peyote. I was like, okay, if you say so. My internal knowing was, this isn't for me. Now, part of it was fear, for sure. But a part of it was my internal, like, this isn't for you. Sat with it twice, and both of those times were very profound. I got my fire name, which is like a whole thing, and I'm grateful for those experiences. And both of those times I was like, okay, yeah, like I get to do this. It makes sense that I do this. Now the third time I sat with peyote, it was a hard no in my system. I knew that I was not meant to sit with that medicine. I went and I sat anyway because what are you talking about? Of course you should sit with the medicine. We're all doing it. It's your initiation. It's okay. I was studying with I was living in Mexico at the time, and I was studying these different traditions. I'm not going to give more detail than that, but it was great. It was part of my spiritual initiation for sure. But I had a clarity that it was a no for me, and I went and I did it anyway. And if I tell you, it took me over a year to integrate that, and I was knocked off of my path clearly, because I was no longer in integrity and alignment. I had the privilege of healing the mess that I made by going into that ceremony. Was it the end of the world? No. Was it a derailment? Yes. Did I get back on track? No problem. Right? So at the end of the day, like, it's just these decisions, they don't define us. Ultimately nothing can hurt us. But it hurt. And it was physically uncomfortable what I was experiencing. I got very sick afterwards, because that's the way my body talks to me. She goes, I'm going to knock you out for a little bit. Yeah. Because otherwise I'm like, I'll keep going.
Forced rest.
Yeah. Completely. And so I really had to sit with, why did I make that choice? How did I let somebody become an authority over myself? Right? And it went back to perceiving that men know better than, I had a lot around patriarchy and masculine definition of, authority. And so that was a piece of it, and unraveling that. So was it perfect? Yeah, it was perfect. It all was the medicine I needed, and I probably could have avoided about a year's worth of integration if I had recognized men aren't the authority. I'm going to choose what I know to be true, and I'm not going to sit with this medicine right now. And the medicine wouldn't have kicked my ass so hard. So that's what I have to say about that.
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about plant medicine as essentially a tool.
Yeah.
What would you say are your other tools that you use to kind of pinpoint some of these barriers or blocks and like move through them or integrate after you do something, or what are kind of the things that like you use for yourself, and then like tools that you use for people that you work with?
Number one tool that I use for myself is having mentors. 100%. Because I am effective at finding my own barriers, for sure. Say more effective than 90% of the population, probably, because I've been doing it and I've committed to it. And I'll miss things. I have my own biases. And so having people in my corner who will hold me accountable and who can see, I have psychics and intuitives that I work with, and especially my mentors. I'm like, what am I missing? And I want the ones who are, I have one, her name's Talia. I love her so much. I go to her if I need hard truth, right? If I don't want someone to sugarcoat, I want someone to really tell me what I'm missing. I go to her. I've got my gal Marjorie. If I want somebody to love on me and give me insight, I go to her. Right? I have a handful of people that I really trust that help me in my integration process, because I think another profound myth is that we're meant to do this all on our own. That healing happens in a silo, that we are responsible for our healing. We are responsible for our healing. But part of that responsibility is to find people that we trust, to co-regulate with, to receive information from.
Yeah. And
then always filter it through my own. Like, Talia might say something, and I'm like, no. Right? And then in a year or two, I probably will be like, oh, dang it, she's right. Right? Or I might say, like, I have a friend who says, he's like, try on what anyone has to say. If they're calling you a purple dinosaur, probably that's not accurate. But if 17 people say you're a purple dinosaur, you might want to consider whether or not you are, right?
Yeah.
So that's one thing I would say is definitely I have people that I go back to over and over again that I trust. And this is important. Like, I don't just trust anyone to look at my field. Right? I don't just trust anyone to give me advice or insight or information. If somebody volunteers that without me asking, I might listen and say, oh, thank you, and then discern whether or not it's something I want to keep or reject. But I'm very discerning about who I let see my natal chart, who I let see any of my information, because I can filter it at this point. I can filter like, oh, that's your insight. But intention is really powerful. And so if we're hearing and getting information from anybody, ultimately, again, one of the most powerful things, so it doesn't really matter. But I am discerning about who I let enter my field. From there, tools that I use, I'm constantly doing my own transformation work. Constantly. I mean, you know, the ALA container is one of the places that I'll go, and I'm like, okay, I can tune up here, right? I know that I can use that container as a way to look at my stuff. Journaling, can't recommend journaling highly enough. Writing, so physically writing moves energy out of our system. But yeah, I'd say like mentorship, doing the work. I meditate a lot, and I really recommend that people meditate.
What, for someone that doesn't meditate, where do you like start them at? Like how long and every day?
Yeah. I would say consistency is key. So if you can do every day, like I'd rather see somebody do 5 minutes every day than 1 hour once a month, right? Because it's that consistency. It's letting the body know, okay, we're gonna go deeper right now. We're gonna do that we're gonna perpetually do that. That creates that safety versus once in a while we're gonna go here. It's like you know, insurance companies ask people who ski, do you ski consistently or do you ski every once in a while, right? If somebody skis every once in a while, they're going to have a higher rate to pay than somebody who skis consistently, which seems counterintuitive because you're like, aren't they at a greater risk? But it's like, no, they know where they're going. They know what they're doing, right? And so it's the same with our nervous system and meditation. Similar. Yeah. Kind of a stretch, but similar, right?
What is your go-to recommendation for meditation? Do you like, I'll just let you.
Yeah, it depends. So Vedic meditation is fabulous. It's a great entry point. It's like TM, transcendental meditation. Vedic and transcendental are very similar, if not the same.
So
Mantra based. That you repeat over and over again to get down into a meditative space. I think it's a great entry point. Following your breath, watching a candle. There are walking meditations that are powerful and potent. Now, if you really want to deep dive, the most effective meditation, the most potent meditation that I am aware of is Vipassana. Are you familiar with Vipassana meditation?
I'm not.
So have you heard of these 10-day silent retreats?
Sure.
Okay. So there are a lot of silent retreats out there now. Adyashanti, I used to do his, love him. But Goenka was the man who brought it from Burma and came to the West and brought Vipassana, which is a mindfulness meditation. It is a very specific technique that you're taught over the course of 10 days. And over those 10 days, you do not talk. You're in complete silence. So you are not talking to anyone. You are not making any eye contact. You're going entirely internal. And you are equipped within those 10 days with a tool of meditation that is highly effective at keeping the vessel clean and clear. So for people who are like, I'm ready, let's go, I'm going all in, Vipassana, don't think twice. There are going to be moments where people want to leave, for sure. I mean, for me, I couldn't have been happier. I was like, can we go another 20 days, right? But for most people, you know, you're sitting with yourself in silence for the first time ever, right? And it's powerful medicine. So Vipassana is definitely when people are like, I'm serious, I really want to have a big impact and a big change in my life. I'm like, don't think twice.
Wait, but at a silent retreat, you're silent, but they're talking to you about how to do it?
Right. So It depends on the retreat setting, but for Goenka Vipassana, and there are other teachers now who teach Vipassana who are also excellent. I've never sat in that environment. But with Goenka, there's in the evening and during different meditations, there's recordings that play that are teaching you how to meditate.
Is it breath based or is it a secret?
You'd have to go and find out for yourself. But it's mindfulness based, so it's body scanning.
Oh, yeah.
Awareness of body scan. And in the beginning, there is a breath technique that they teach you for the first 2 days that you're doing. And then from there, you go into the body scans, and then there's another heart opening meditation. It's fabulous. I cannot recommend it highly enough.
I'm sure that's like very healing with all the stimulations we all have 24/7.
Oh, yeah.
I think the first time she ever got me to meditate, I like went into the playroom area and came out, I was like, I think I cried or something. Like, yeah. It's like, I wasn't like upset, but like, I had tears. Like, I don't know why that happened. It was like really wild.
What did you make of that?
I felt, I felt like my nervous system was so overrun that it was like almost like sweating when you exercise, you know. It was like my body was just like excreting, like it was just like, was that my physical mental like wall?
Yeah.
And so it was some type of reaction from my body, because it wasn't like I wasn't upset about something. It was about trying to just slow down, and I just like, for some reason, like I had tears on my face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So catharsis is definitely another tool that I use personally for releasing those barriers. So screaming, shouting, jumping, shaking, crying. It's really important. We are so adept societally at repressing emotions, at repressing experience, right? We're often told there's micro and macro gaslighting that is happening societally, right? Oh, it's not that serious. Why are you making such a big deal of that? And so then we're conditioned to not experience what we're experiencing, to not process what we're experiencing. And then what happens? We repress it, we store it, we hold it. It becomes those blocks and barriers that we're talking about. And it subconsciously defines how we're moving through the world. When we take a moment to stop and to reset, to meditate, to go on a retreat, to go to the Himalayas, to do something different than what we are normally accustomed to doing that perpetuates the same ways of being, there's an opportunity to reset, to release. And I think whether it is working with a really good therapist, or a spiritual guide, or going on a retreat, or going to a yoga class, right? I don't care what people do, but everybody needs to turn off the computer.
Yeah.
We need it. We need a reset. And we need them more consistently than we think.
That
right?
resonates with me a lot, personally.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about if someone is listening and they maybe they're not very connected to their own intuition and listening to themselves? I think that happens a lot. What would you typically like, or maybe you don't typically tell people this, but how do you kind of speak to a place for people to start?
Yeah.
Kind of connecting.
So there's a fun meditation that people can do, anyone can do. And you close your eyes and you think about something that you know is yes for you, right? And you feel what that yes feels like, something that you love, something that feels really good and nourishing, not something that feels good, right? Like you can love, something can feel good and you're like, that's probably not it. But something that is nourishing. And, you know, for me, like if I need to reset my system, I might think of a beach. I love the beach, right? So I'll think about the beach and being on the beach and having my feet in the sand. And I feel what it feels like in my body. And there's an expansiveness that I feel. And then I'll think about something that hurts, that doesn't feel aligned, that doesn't feel good for me to do. Right? It might be a painful experience, something like that. And I'll feel what happens to my body, my system. Instantly, I start contracting. So there's expansion and there's contraction. And those are the two energetics. And both of them are important. Both of them are necessary. And when it comes to making decisions, usually we can tell something's in alignment because it's expansive. If something feels contracted, probably when it comes to decision making, that's not what's happening. That's not in alignment. So one meditation or one way to tune into our own intuition is just to start with, is it a yes or a no for me? What does it feel like in my body? Okay, let me sit with what it feels like in my body for 5 minutes to just be an expansion. And then the mind will try to go somewhere else. Okay, wait, I'm coming back to that beach. I'm coming back to the expansion. And then, okay, what does it feel like to be in contraction? And you sit with it, and it's uncomfortable, but you sit with it so that your body really knows it. Okay, now let me feel expansion again. Okay, got it. And you go back and forth until you have a really clear sense of, this is expansion for me, this is contraction for me. So when you are in a moment and your intuition is like, this is expansion, you're like, oh, it's a yes. Or, ooh, I feel that contraction. I know what that feels like, so I did it in that meditation. Then you know it's a no. So that would be a really, I would say, rudimentary but powerful way to get in touch with your intuition.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, what about people that might say this is like too woo-woo? Do you get that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
To your face? Will people
Oh,
say it
do
to your face?
I hope they say it to my face. I'm sure they're saying it behind my back. But certainly so my intention in this lifetime is to be a permission slip for people to be as unabashed and unapologetically honest as possible. And if that means it has something to do with me, all the better. Right? Like there's nothing that anybody can say to me that is going to offend me. I might be like, that was but generally speaking, I'm not going to get offended. I'm not going to get upset. I might have my historical parts might have a reaction to something that somebody said, right? But I'm pretty discerning at this point. I will know, and I might even name, you know what? A part of me is having a reaction right now because that reminded me of a time when I was a kid. So hold on, let me just sit with this within myself for a moment. But otherwise, I'm like, okay, great. Why do you feel that way? So what does that mean that it's too woo-woo? Why is woo not okay? Right? Like, cause I'm like, it's woo-woo, yes, great, woo. Fantastic. But so for people who may say that's too out there for me, you don't have to go out there. Where do you want to go? I'll meet you there. Right? And also, I may not be the person to work with.
Sure.
Yeah.
But just because you don't want to go out there doesn't mean that out there is bad. And just because you want to stay in here doesn't mean that that's bad because I want to go out there. It's like, where are you and where can we meet that expands both of us? Right? Because I think any interaction is an opportunity to co-regulate and to expand. So for people who say, like, this all feels a little too woo for me, okay, great. And by the way, you happen to be having this experience all of the time. Whether you want to address it and look at it or not is your prerogative. Won't make a difference to me. May make a difference to you. Right? And so I'm not asking everybody to go merge with oneness and all of God's creation, right? I'm not even asking you to believe that there's God. It doesn't matter. But I will say that there's an opportunity to live, like, if you're like, I'm content, I have no qualms about anything, my nervous system is totally regulated, everything is working, my life is in flow, I'm as expansive as I can possibly be, I know that there's all of these infinite opportunities that are out there for me, and I'm continuing to expand into that infiniteness, and I don't believe in woo. Like, great, do what you're doing. Sounds fun, sounds fabulous. Like, you're doing great. And I will say, I haven't really met people who are in that level of expansion who don't believe in something greater than themselves.
I think language is really interesting here because, especially with social media and you know, what I think of is, you know, people that may be more like logical and science focused, but the truth is, even in that community, of speaking in terms of language, like, what we're talking about is also being talked about there. It's just in different words, right?
Absolutely.
And we know, I mean, there is science backed, you know, like the biology of belief, and we know, like, if you go into a hospital, like, scientists will tell you if you believe you're going to get better, you're more likely to get better, right? Like,
yes.
And anyways, so I just think it's really interesting because I think there is, you know, once you get deep into yoga, the spiritual world, like you develop a certain vernacular that kind of starts to sound different to maybe what people are used to, but the truth is it's all the same thing, right? We're talking about the power of your thoughts to kind of create your reality, right? The power of, like, your actions to create your reality. That's what energy is, you know?
Yes.
And we didn't even talk about your definition of energy, but it's kind of like it's all really the same thing. So I think about when I think about people saying things are woo woo or, you know, or whatever term, you know, it really is. We're all talking about the same thing. We're all, like you're saying, we're all living the same experience, and whatever your belief is, you know, when you're faced with some sort of life-threatening situation, I guarantee you that you're asking for help, you know, like, to somebody, right? So it's like, yeah, I think that there's power in making the connection is really all I was trying to say. Like, I think there's power in connecting. Like, you know, you can talk about in regular terms, like the way you talk to yourself in your own mind, like, you know, that's happening. That's not woo woo, right?
Absolutely.
And that's part of spirituality and energy and belief, and you know, that's a way to unblock and all of that too.
So it's funny. You asked me, like, who do I typically work with? And you asked, are they high performers? Typically, I'm working with very high performing individuals, CEOs, celebrities, you name it. Like, on the outside, to the outside world, they are kind of a big deal, right? Many of them, when we first started working together, I would never use the language that I'm using now. Ever. Because they couldn't, it just was like, like, no, thank you. And what is important is to be using language that communicates effectively. Like, why are we communicating? To create understanding. So if somebody's like, I don't speak woo, I'm probably not going to speak woo to that person.
Right.
I'm going to speak the language that they speak, because guess what? It's the same, like you're saying. And the science, to me, like, when people are like, oh, it's mutually exclusive, spiritual and scientific, I'm like, what? The science is proving the spirituality, right? We have experiences that we're having that we don't fully make sense of, and then science goes in and says, oh, we can make sense of that, right? And spirituality goes in and says, you're having a human experience that doesn't make sense to anybody on the outside. I can make sense of that. No problem. Let me just go into your field really quick. That makes sense. You make sense. If we go back to when you were 6 years old and you got locked out of that room, now it makes sense why you're behaving the way that you're behaving, right? So we may have more of a propensity to exist within the physical reality, right? Because it feels a little bit safer, or it's what we have access to, it's what we're inclined to engage with, whatever. It doesn't really matter. That may be somebody's preference. Great. I'm not going to speak Mandarin to somebody who speaks Portuguese, right? Like, I'll translate to Portuguese. But at the end of the day, just like language is communicating the same thing. We're experiencing a shared experience, which is the human experience, right? And all of us will resonate with that.
Definitely. Okay, we're going to have to wrap up here soon. I could talk for hours, but I do want to ask, like, is there an example of, or what is the, like, something crazy that has happened, or a surprising outcome that you've had from working with somebody, and kind of like, I understand they're really guiding themselves.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
You're doing the work yourself, but like, in working with someone, what's some like wild experience that you can speak to that kind of just give us an example of how unblocking and clearing can kind of really free you?
Cool. Like, which one?
I'm sure you have a zillion,
The personal one was great, but yeah, it'd be cool to hear.
Yeah, okay, I'm trying to, so many, okay. Like, trying to think of, like, the biggest bang for buck here, but there are so many, like, I'll work with somebody. I've had many an experience like this where we'll work on unblocking something, and the very thing that they're looking to, like, I had a gal who was having a really difficult time in relationship with her partner, and couldn't understand why they were having the same fight over and over again. This isn't like a big one, but this is just an easy thing. They were having the same fight over and over again. I was like, we got to look at what you're holding. I was like, it's not that he's right in what he's saying. People are very like, I'm right, he's wrong. Like, I'm not saying that he's right, but we have to look at you. So, like, what's going on here that this is continuing to perpetuate, that you're having the same fight over and over again? She did some work. We looked at it. We understood what that fight was actually representing, which was something that, of course, happened in childhood and hadn't been resolved. And it was a fight that she witnessed of her parents. And it was that same fight started happening between her and her partner. We unblocked it. We cleared it up. We cleaned up the space. We called back some of her energy and did all of the work. She went to have the same conversation with her partner. They had a completely different outcome. And they've never fought. And this was years ago. They have never thought about that same thing ever again. And for years, this was the same fight that was happening over and over again. I mean, that sort of scenario happens all of the time.
Yeah.
All of the time. Yeah, I've had clients who are on the verge of divorce, who they can't figure out how to communicate with each other. And then we unblock, okay, what's the piece that you're holding? What is the fear that you're holding? What are the belief systems that you're holding? Let's work through this. And I've got many examples of clients who they were really on the verge of divorce and they made it through the other side and they're in very happy relationships. I've got people who were like, I think we should stay together. And I'm like, maybe not so much. And then they're in very happy decoupling, right? And so there's no right or wrong way for it to happen, but to have that clarity. What are some other wild ones? I'm like trying to think of the wild ones. I mean, many of experiences where we clear something up and then people get job offers or an opportunity to like speak somewhere. Or, like, I mean, time and time again. Yeah. I got a text this morning from my client. You're never going to believe what just happened. Like we had a session, and then for the 48 hours after the session, he's like, it's been one magical thing after the other. This. Yeah. So it happens all the time. I'm having a hard time thinking of like.
Yeah, I think that answers the question. Yeah. I think it just puts a little bit of like explanation to like how unblocking can, or clearing this stuff can kind of like expand and like open up your space so that the good comes in, whatever that looks like, right?
So I would say the aligned comes in. Because sometimes the aligned will be messy. Sometimes the aligned will be uncomfortable. But when we work through that, then what comes after that, I wouldn't say is good or bad, but it might be more expansive, right? And so to be clear of the stiff, the blockages, those barriers, to open, to expand, so that we can receive everything that is aligned for us. Okay. I had a complex around hiding. I think I mentioned this before. And I received feedback from my sister, who's amazing. And she looked at me and she said, my experience of you is selfish. And I'm like, says no one ever, right? Like, I'm the ultimate supporter. Like, I am not selfish. She's like, no, Dani, my experience of you is selfish. She's like, you're selfish with your gifts because you're not letting people know who you are and what you're available to do. And when she said that, I got to reflecting. I was like, oh my God, I'm hiding. I won't offer people the opportunity to work with me because I feel like I'm being an imposition. I'm being this. I went back and I looked through, a litany of examples of times that I thought that it was better that I not offer myself forward, that I hide, that I not be an imposition, that I not take up space. And I thought of, and I got to work through those blockages because I was holding that identity of I get to play small. I get to be invisible. I get to stay humble. And because I had taken those identities into every aspect of my life, I missed opportunities to serve, to be of service to other people. And when I unblocked that, it leads to examples of opportunities to come and speak on a podcast or, speak on stages, and many, many opportunities that have subsequently opened. I met a publicist who's like, I'd love to work with you. And experiences that I had when I was younger, but I had pushed away because I was holding that identity in those blocks. Those opportunities were always present. I just wasn't available for them. And now I am. And so not just me, most anybody that I've worked with, we have these experiences where when we remove those blockages, the opportunities have always been there, right? They're like right outside of our field. And then all of a sudden we create that opening because we no longer have that barrier keeping it from actually being present for us. It's like when people say you can't experience love if you don't love yourself. It's like if you don't believe that you are lovable and you have that barrier to receiving, people are going to be trying to love you so much. They're like, do you not get it? Like, I think you're the most lovable, wonderful person in the world. And we're like, they don't mean it. They da-da-da. It's not because the love isn't there. It's not because you're not lovable. Everyone around you may be trying to love you. You might be putting the barrier and the block from receiving it. So when you can clean it up, all of a sudden everything that's aligned for you is able to come in.
It's like very motivating to like process that.
I want to keep going, but I think we probably should wrap it up, and maybe we'll just do it again. This was so wonderful. So tell before we go, like, please speak to anything you have going on, where people can find you to work with you, like anything you want to promote.
Thanks. Okay, so in October, I'm leading a retreat in Portugal. I'm super excited about. I don't know, my friend put it all together, to be perfectly honest. I just get to show up and teach. But it's on a coastline, and it's beautiful, and it's the retreat center is incredible. It's all permaculture, farm to table, food, like 5-minute drive to the beach, gorgeous, just spectacular, all really consciously curated. And it'll be a nice place to, like what we were talking about before, to reset, to come into self. And I'll be leading workshops around different transformation techniques and things of that nature, and then yoga and meditation. So really excited for that. That's October 18th to the 23rd. And then what else? And I can send you the link to that.
Yeah, please do.
For sure. And then to work with me, people can reach out to me on Instagram. It's super easy.
Okay.
At Dani Pogo, DaniPogo. What are other opportunities that I have coming up? Those are the big ones right now that I'm promoting.
And you work with people, I already know this, but on Zoom or online or in person, so it doesn't have to be here in Austin.
No, definitely not. Actually, all of my clients are long distance right now.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's typically that way. I work with people all over the world. So,
The Portuguese coast is awesome, so that sounds like a good
Oh.
That's the 22nd is my birthday.
Ooh.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here. This has been incredible, and we're just gonna have you back because I feel like we could talk for 8 hours.
Yeah,
so.
that's really awesome.
At least. Thanks again.
Thank you. So special.